about the coursework, okay, for your assessment. And what we've got is basically 3 sections in today's session. Firstly, I'm going to go over the coursework cover sheet. Secondly, I'm going to go over how we grade your work. And then thirdly, I'm going to go over or open up the floor for any questions and any queries you might have. I want to emphasise this to you, that this is basically just good practice. Some of the things I'm going to point out to you today, it's not obligatory that you do this, okay, but you will find that many of the things that I cover are good practice, okay. Right, so we're going in here through the essay cover sheet, okay. So I've just gone through this section here, just for the purpose of the recording. I'm going to quickly do this again. The essay writing toolkit is available on Blackboard. There's an expectation that you will have read that, okay? Please make sure you look at it, it's very, very helpful. Secondly, have you selected one of these theories or perspectives? It may well be that you're choosing a topic that isn't on there, okay? In which case I want to know why. Why are you doing that? Choose one of these topics, okay? If you've got any queries on this, you need to speak to either myself or your seminar tutor. Okay, we're here to help, so don't be sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. Speak to us, okay? Right, now the whole point is that you apply one of these theories or perspectives to a topic that we've covered, or that you've covered in one of these other level 5 modules, okay? And we'll be talking a bit more detail about how you apply theory in a moment. Right, we're almost back to where we were. Okay, right, with the introduction then, okay, have you included the introductory paragraph, okay? Right, so as I said then, an argument. Your paper isn't just basically talking about something. You need to engage the literature. It needs to be engaged, it needs to be meaningful, and you need to be saying something, not just talking about, describing things in a kind of haphazard, meaningless way. The second thing, okay, the organisation of your project. Have you structured your paper in a meaningful way? Is there a logic to what you're saying and the order in which you're saying it? Again, you know, none of this is kind of rocket science in many ways. So we're basically just forming a view on how well you understand this topic. Okay, so in many ways, these are kind of little indicators that we look for. So if your paper sets out an argument in your introduction, it's signposting to the reader where the paper's going. But also if you provide a structure, it tells us that you've thought about what you're saying, okay? And then the third point is the rationale. Have you thought about why you're saying what you're saying in the order in which you're saying it, okay? Again, it all shows us that you've thought about it, that you understand, you're not just kind of talking randomly, just kind of putting some stuff down, okay? There's a logic to what you're doing. Okay, now this is important as well. Is your introduction free reference? Now this point's important because obviously what you're being asked to do is not only set out an argument, but you're being asked to set out an informed argument. Okay, now that's the difference. It's not what you think, it's what you think based upon the research, based upon what you've read. So you need to situate your observations within the appropriate academic framework. That means you need to support what you're saying. So tell the reader from the outset which work you're going to be using. So if you're going to be applying Marxist theory, you need to be telling the reader which particular writers you're going to be applying, for example. Yeah? You know, these sort of things really, really help. They all add to you being able to illustrate how well you understand this. Right, finally, on this bit anyway, 6. Have you included a fully referenced conclusion, summarising and integrating your arguments and discussing their implications? This bit is so, so important. Often, you know, we get to the end of a paper, and you know, we may not have, when we're thinking about what grade to give it, the last thing we read is going to be your conclusion. Now, a lot of the time, a lot of what's been said prior to this is stuff you've got out of books, but your conclusion is where you're really bringing everything together again, okay? And it's the last opportunity for you to convince us how well you've understood the topic, how well you've applied the theory. Please give considerable thought to your conclusion. It's not an afterthought. Your conclusion isn't just tying it all up, okay? It's about really hammering home your central point, your central argument. So I'm going to go through this in a moment. Basically, your introduction and your conclusion should pretty much mirror each other. It will be argued. It has been argued. Do not introduce anything in your conclusion that you have not argued throughout the paper. I read this so many times. I'll be reading an essay, a piece of coursework, get towards the end, I'm thinking, where's this going? What they're trying to say? And then in the conclusion, the students come out with a statement, and I'm like, well, where did that come from? You've not argued any of that throughout this paper. You've just kind of come out with this statement in your conclusion. So make sure your deductions, what you say throughout the paper, is supported by your conclusion. Again, it's so important that you conclude in a meaningful and informed way. It's not just a way of finishing it off. Okay, it's not like a kind of like a underlining the paper. It really is kind of you bringing everything together. So, it needs to be, at least, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs. And again, it needs to be fully referenced. You need to show that the argument that you put forward is situated within the appropriate academic framework, that there's evidence for what you're saying. Okay, so you hammer the point home again. Again, all of these things add up. It shows us that you've thought about what you're saying. Number 7. Wow. Right, if I had £1 for every time I say in a piece of coursework, what you do is you invite the reader to infer relevance from what you say. So therefore you need to give greater attention to focus. If I had £1 for every time I've said that in a piece of feedback, I'd be very, very rich indeed. The vast majority of you in this room, I will probably say this to when I mark your paper, it's one of the most common mistakes that students make. Make sure you're not one of those people, and I'm going to tell you in a moment how you can avoid this. What you need to do is you need to go through your paper and ask yourself, am I addressing the question directly? If you're not directly addressing the question, then you're not getting any marks because you're not answering the question. You're being assessed on your ability to meet the assessment remit, which is to apply a theory to one of the topics you've looked at in one of the other level 5 modules. If you're not doing that, if you're talking about describing stuff that has no benefit, then you're not getting any marks, okay? So it's really, really important. As I say, 75% of you will probably end up doing this. You'll just talk about the subject, but I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can make sure that you're doing this in a more direct way. Okay, so be mindful of that. It happens so often. Make sure you're doing what you are supposed to be doing, okay? Right, level, where are we here? Have you read over your project? Okay, this is a classic one as well. Often you'll find that if you leave this to the last minute, i.e. kind of the morning before the assessment is due, you'll find your paper will be littered with very silly little mistakes where you kind of repeated yourself, or there's grammatical errors. Somebody did tell me recently, I've never tried this myself, and you guys probably know more about this than I do, that you can copy essays or you can copy text into something called Google Translate, and it will read them back to you. Have you heard of this? Somebody suggested to me that this is a really good idea, because when you hear your essay being spoken back to you, you can actually hear that sometimes it doesn't make sense, okay? So if you leave yourself a couple of days before you actually submit your assessment, and then go back to it with fresh eyes, you'll see some of these mistakes. And it's not just kind of spelling mistakes, it's not kind of silly mistakes. Sometimes there'll be huge, whopping, great big gaps where you've kind of assumed that the reader knew what you were talking about, and you need to explain that. Okay, there'll be big gaps. One of the other things that you can do with this as well is if you get somebody who knows nothing about the topic, brother, sister, mum, dad, whatever, and say to them, can you read through this and tell me whether or not it makes sense, okay? And say to them, I want you to be brutally honest, I want you to tell me, does this make sense? And then, ask them questions, did you understand what I meant with that? And then it becomes clear they didn't. Okay, so try to get somebody else to read through the paper and just proofread it, okay? It's really, really useful that you do that. And again, one of the things that you're being assessed on here is your ability, and I'm going to go through the essay, the criteria in a moment, your ability to be able to express yourself clearly, okay? So it may well be that you understand all of this stuff, but if you can't convey your understanding clearly and precisely, that will reflect itself adversely in the grade that you're given. So, if any of you in this room have ever received feedback that says your grammar was a little bit bit unclear, or you need to seek assistance with your grammar, if you've not done anything about that since that feedback was given, i.e. you've not been to any workshops, you've not sought any help or assistance, chances are the marker's going to say the same thing again. Okay, so I'm talking to you people. You're the people, you all need to really, in many respects, it's good practice to do this. Get somebody to read through your paper and check for errors and omissions and make sure it actually flows. Okay, does it make sense? Okay, very, very simple thing, but it makes a huge amount of difference. Polishing your essay, okay, your coursework. Okay, have you referenced your coursework consistently and properly? Well, now, as level 5 students, there's an expectation now that you're able to use references correctly. Okay, I still sometimes read papers, unfortunately, in level 6. And there's no references in them. I'm like, wow, that's astonishing that you've managed to get this far without realising. References, like carpenters carpenters have like a toolbox, don't they? They have lots of tools in their toolbox. As academics, our toolboxes are references. So without references, we're nothing really, because what we're saying is just opinion. We need to situate what we say within the appropriate academic framework. That means references. Okay. Now, if you're still a little bit unclear on referencing, then there's a link. If you click on that hyperlink there, it will take you through to the university website where there's information that you can obtain with regard to the correct method of referencing. So, if anyone has ever mentioned in your feedback before, your referencing is a bit iffy, please look at that, okay? Again, I was saying in my feedback, if I think your referencing is poor, I will say, why did you tip that you used a consistent method of referencing when clearly you haven't, okay? So, be reflective. It's here to help you, okay? It's there to help you. Okay, next point. I think we're on to bibliographies. Yeah, the same here for bibliographies. Okay. Again, bibliographies are not an afterthought. They're not an afterthought. They're so important. A bibliography needs to be presented in the correct way, which is alphabetically. Often it's not presented alphabetically. Every reference that you have in your essay should also be contained within that bibliography. That's the whole purpose of it. Sometimes I'll go through an essay and I'll check, I'll see a reference, and I'll see whether it's in your bibliography, and I'll say, why is that not in there? What's that all about? That's the whole point, isn't it? The reference in your paper, your evidence, if it's not in your bibliography, how can I check that? So it's really, again, small things, but they build up, okay? So make sure that every single one of your references in your paper is also in your bibliography. That's the whole point of the bibliography, okay? It's the evidence for your paper. Okay, and again, click on that link. Spell check. Most computers now have a spell check automatically, don't they? So that shouldn't be a problem. What is the length of your coursework, inclusive of footnotes? Some people use footnotes extensively, thinking, no, that they don't count. They do, okay? Your bibliography does not count towards your word count, because I don't see that you should be, if you've used 50 textbooks, I don't see that you should be penalised for the number of books that you've looked at. So your bibliography can be as long as you like, okay? So that's not included in your word count. Is your project within the 3,500 word limit? There is no 5-10% either way, certainly not in the upper limit. You can't go over. It's 3,500 words. That is your word limit. It's not 3,501, it's 3,500, okay? If you want to go under, that's down to you, but your marker might make the point, this paper is a little bit short, maybe you could use those words. So try to get your paper as near to 3,500 words as possible. Okay, there's no 10% over on this, because that's obviously a considerable number of words on 3,500. So keep it within the word limit. Often, a paper that is well edited is often much, much better. Okay, so if you can get into the practice of ensuring you are within the word limit, your paper, I would suggest, would probably be an awful lot better, because you've gone through and you've said, what needs to be in this paper? What needs to be in? What can I get rid of? Why say something in 50 words when you can say it in 5? Okay, get it to the point. It's going to help you convey understanding rather than skirting around the issue. It's going to be much more precise. Okay, this is another point. It may seem silly to do this, but it's important to us. have you used 12-point font scale? Sometimes students use really tiny font, and obviously we're reading this from the screen, and although we can expand the paper, there's a lot of faffing about for us to do that. So just use 12-point font. Don't use fancy font. Just use your normal kind of area or Times New Roman. None of this kind of fancy squiggly stuff because it's difficult for us to read it. Okay, so use a standard font like that. Right, is your coursework anonymous? All marking is anonymous, okay, so we're not going to know who's produced what work. So make sure your name and student number is nowhere on the paper, okay? So requirement now that all your work is marked anonymously, so do not include your name on there. Okay, this bit is really important. Have you read... Have you read the marking criteria? Okay, I'm going to look at that in a moment before, I'm just going to finish this and we'll go to that. So you're going to need to look at the marking criteria, I'll come back to that in a moment. Right, and this bit here, your feedback will be made available to you 15 working days after submitting your coursework. Okay, so that's 3 weeks, 15 working days. So what will happen is that I'll put an announcement on Blackboard saying your grades are now available on Blackboard for you to view. Now, let's just go to the next bit, because this bit's really important as well. This section here. Often we can see whether or not you've accessed your paper. And obviously we spend a lot of time annotating your papers and giving you feedback. And sometimes students don't look at them. We can actually see on the system who's looked at their feedback, and some students don't even look at the feedback. It's like, wow, I don't know if they got bothered or they don't know that they can, but you do get, you'll get, as you know, you get your kind of written feedback and you get the annotations on the actual paper. Any of those of you here that I've talked before will know that I give audio feedback. There's a function on there for me to give 3 minutes audio feedback, which is what I tend to do. But either way, you get feedback. Please listen to it or read it. It's really important. And likewise, feedback that you may have been given previously, access that, because that stuff's really, really important, because it's showing you how to improve. It's not just saying what you've done wrong, it's also saying what you could have done better. And this section here that I've got on here is intended for this particular point. Try to be reflective on what you've done, okay? So, you don't have to do this, but this is just for your benefit. Ask yourself, what are the strengths of your coursework? What have you done right here? Okay? What do you think are the strengths of your work? And then also, you've got a section there, give a description of the weaknesses. So, be reflective, and be honest as well with yourself. What areas do you think you could have improved on? And then, when you get your feedback, reflect upon that. It may well be that, you think you haven't done enough research, and when it's marked, the marker might say, well, your research for this was a bit flimsy. In which case, you knew what was wrong with it in the first place, so you know what you need to address. So be reflective. It's how you improve, isn't it? By reflecting on these things. It's not just a question of going into Blackboard and looking at you got 65 and thinking, whoopee, I'm going to go out and celebrate and get drunk. It's about being reflective and kind of looking at what's been said, taking it on board, considering it and improving. Okay? Because that's what this is all about. It's about improving with each piece of assessment that you do. Okay? And likewise, go back to your old pieces of coursework as well. And look at the feedback you were given. What have you done to address that? If somebody said to you before that your paper needed to be structured better, have you thought about how you could do that in the interim? All of these things will help you. It's all about improving. It's all about good practice. Okay, right. Now before I go on to this section here, does anybody have any questions so far? Is this all making sense to you so far, yeah? Some of this you will be familiar with as well, probably already, hopefully. Some of it might just kind of, I don't know, maybe give you some food for thought, I don't know. Okay, right, this is the assessment criteria, okay? In marking students' work, these are the things that we're going to be considering. The extent to which the remit of the assignment has been met, okay, the question addressed. Have you actually done what is required? Have you applied one of those chronological perspectives or theories to a topic that you've looked at in one of these other modules? Have you actually done that? Some of you are not going to do that, in which case you're going to get a low mark in this component. The accuracy with which relevant theoretical arguments, concepts and evidence are described and analysed. Right, the accuracy accuracy with which they are described and analysed. I'm going to use this whiteboard in a minute to show you how you can do that, what that means in practice. Okay, I'll try to contextualise that for you. The degree to which the theories and concepts discussed are integrated and contextualised. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. The range of source material used. Okay, again, I say this again and again and again. A house is built upon solid foundations. Okay, if the foundations of the house are not solid, it's a rubbish house. The house might fall down. Likewise, with a piece of coursework, the foundations are your research. Okay, how good is your research? How solid, how cogent, how persuasive is your research? How many books have you looked at? Have you looked at journals, or have you just sat at home and looked at the one core textbook and maybe done some internet searches? Flimsy foundations, perhaps, if that's the case. So make sure that the research that you've put into your paper is solid, because everything you say flourishes from that. The broader your research, the better your paper. Okay, because it shows that you've looked at a range and complexity of ideas, and that will reflect itself in what you say in your paper as well. It all comes from the research. Again, there's resources available for you to look at in the library to tell you how you go about researching papers as well. I haven't actually put the link up on there, but if you click on the links that I've referred you to earlier on, you'll see there's some information there as well. So if your research skills aren't that good, then you need to be thinking, right, what can I do? Go to a library, speak to the criminology librarian and ask for some help. There's leaflets there, there's lots of information. Yeah? So research your paper well. And that, as I say, that isn't just basically talking about what you've got in the core textbook and a couple of Google searches. It's much more rigorous than that. Okay, the coherence and integration of the structure of the work presented, the coherence. How well are you able to express yourself? It's the point I made earlier on about being able to convey your understanding in a way that convinces us that you understand this, okay? Have you thought about the structure of your work, or is it just all over the place? Is it just all bitty, okay? We'll come back to that in a moment. Yeah. The clarity, spelling, grammar, and technical accuracy with which ideas are expressed. Are you able to express yourself clearly and, moreover, precisely? Okay, these things are so important. Okay, right, that's the cover sheet. And we should do on a 24 paper as well, there you go. Okay. Right, does that make some sense to you? Is that pretty clear? Has anybody got any questions on that before I move on to the next part, what I want to look at? Does that make some sense to you? Yeah, is that helpful? Yeah? It's intended to be helpful, okay? I don't think of it like a millstone around your neck, because what God did, I don't know how I'm going to do. Think about what's been said here and take it for what it is. It's meant to be helpful. Okay? Right, next bit. What I want to do now is I want to put this section here about the assessment criteria into some kind of context for you. Let me just turn it off the board. Right, okay. What I'm about to outline to you is basically some of the things that we look for when we're assessing coursework. Okay, just to give you an idea of some things you might want to address. Okay, right. These are sort of templates, if you like, of different pieces of coursework. Right, usually papers up to 49. Let's do 50 to 59, 60, 69, 70 plus. Okay, right, so right. I would suspect that most of you now, maybe with the exception of one or two grades, will kind of your academic profile will be developing some kind of a profile at the moment. So you might be finding you're getting 40s, you're getting 50s, or you're getting 50s and one or two 60s, or you're getting 60s and a few 70s, but you may not really understand what's responsible for that in terms of why you're tending to get those types of grades. So what I'm about to say to you might actually help you in terms of how you might move from different grading categories, what you need to do in order to improve, okay? These papers here, okay, broadly speaking, papers that are graded in this area. There's a range of reasons for that. Firstly, these papers tend to be ill-informed. They tend to have very little by way of research. They tend to be compounded by poor grammar, so they're unable to express themselves. The structure tends to be poor. The understanding is kind of cursory in many ways. There is some level of understanding, but it's not really thought through, it's not well formulated, it's all a bit fragmented. Right, the vast majority of you are going to be here. Okay, you're going to be sort of 50s and 60s. If you're in this grade here, then what I'm about to say to you is going to be really important, because this will show you how you can jump from this to this, and I'll talk about how you can go from this to this. Basically, these papers here, 50 to 59, these tend to be what we call descriptive papers, okay? And having spoken to many students, I've kind of got an idea of how, or what causes this, let's say. And often what happens is that, there you are, there's you. One of the reasons why I think people tend to end up with descriptive papers is the way in which they go about applying their knowledge. So this is what happens. You've got your textbooks, okay, your various different sources, let's say 6, okay, and here's your assessment. And what tends to happen with descriptive papers is that the student simply describes things, okay, and this is why this happens, is that you've got your books in front of you, and you say to yourself, right, okay, that bit there in this book here, I'm going to rewrite that, that's really useful, and I'm going to put that bit there, I'll rewrite that bit. This bit in this book here, that will follow on from that bit, that's quite good, I'll rewrite that, and I'll put that there, and then I'll put that there. And it's kind of, this becomes kind of like a jigsaw puzzle of all little bits that you've got from very different books, okay? Now the problem with that is that these papers become fragmented, or they appear fragmented, in the one thing that is missing is that none of this stuff has actually gone in there. You've not actually thought about what you're saying. You've not actually engaged this literature or engaged this research in a meaningful way. All you're doing is you're just copying stuff down. You're rewording it, but you're not actually engaging. You're not thinking about it. It's not going in there. Okay. So if you've been getting those types of grades, I suspect that might be one of the reasons why. Because you've not actually been engaging the literature in a meaningful way. So one way of getting from this to this is, rather than being descriptive, you are analytical. So again, you've got your, so you've got more resources, because as I said, all houses are built upon solid foundations, coursework is built upon solid research. There you go, there's your assessment. Now, what needs to happen is that it needs to go from there, from the books, into your head, and then you put it down. You engage it in a meaningful way. Now, let me show you how you can do this. One way of moving from a descriptive framework to an analytical framework is to develop one of these, an argument, which is what I'm trying to get you to do, to get you to think about. So you engage your literature, your research in a meaningful way. Okay, so you develop an argument, okay, or arguments. Okay? So in your introduction, this paper is going to apply Marxist theory to whatever, and it's going to argue this, and this, using this, and this. Okay? So you engage your literature. You're not just describing stuff. Okay? You're not just putting stuff down. Now, in order to get into this category here, 70s plus, this really depends upon the persuasiveness of your argument. Not only do you have an argument or a series of arguments, but your argument is highly well thought through. Okay? It's highly analytical. So what you've done is you've provided persuasive evidence. You've considered counter-arguments, these kind of things. So the way we look at it is that these types of grades is what we call you've imposed yourself upon the question in a meaningful, persuasive way. So these are highly analytical, lots of level of analysis. Lots of level of analysis. Right, let me explain this to you. I was in a seminar group, we were in a seminar group, weren't we, the other week, and we were talking about a critique that you used, wasn't it? We were talking about, and you remember what it was, the labelling perspective?
The right.
We were looking at the labelling perspective, and you said that the new right criticised it for this. And the point I'm making is that when you look at your textbooks, when you look at the literature, simply because something is presented as a criticism, okay, Doesn't mean to say, well, that's it, we move on. That theory's shit now, that's done and dusted. There's a criticism of it all. Just simply because it's in a book doesn't mean to say that's it, we write that theory off or that perspective off. You evaluate the theories, you look at the evidence, look at the different points. An evaluation isn't just a list of criticisms, okay? That's not what it is. An evaluation is also emphasising the positives, the strengths as well of something, not just the criticisms, the critiques of it. And all of this needs to be made sense of before you get to that. Okay, now let me show you, let me map out to you a way that you can do this. One way of achieving this, and you'll all have your own thoughts on this as well, how you might go about doing this, is I discovered mind maps late in life. I didn't know what they were until a few years ago. But wow, what a powerful, useful thing that they are. If you look at all your research, all of that, and put it into one piece of paper that you can see, look at it, think about it. So, right, what does the research suggest? What sense can I make of this? So you know that bit when you're writing your essay, so here's your essay, and you get to the bit here, the conclusion, that's the bit where you actually start thinking about it, some of you, isn't it? All this stuff is just descriptive, and then you get to it because you're right, I need to start thinking about what I'm going to say, and tying it up. If you take that bit there, the bit where you've actually engaged the literature, you've thought about it, and put that at the start, so rather than saying this is what I have argued, you start by saying, right, this is what this paper is going to argue, rather than the marker having to read it thinking, where's it going, what's she saying, what's he saying, where's it going, If you tell the reader at the outset, it's signposts, it makes it easier, it helps you convey solid understanding from the outset. Right, your argument. So you've looked at all of the stuff, you've looked at what and you thought, right, this is what I can say here, this might be persuasive, this is what the evidence seems to suggest. So how do you go about mobilising that? Well, let me show you. Right, so this is your essay, okay, so you've got your introduction. Your introduction is going to set out your argument, or your arguments. It's going to set out the evidence for your argument. It's going to set out your rationale and your structure, okay? Then what you do is, it's kind of like a tree. Imagine a tree. What you've got here is what I call a golden thread, okay? So your central line of argument, okay? So Marxist theories are particularly useful, or feminist theories are particularly useful for explaining the phenomena of trafficking, for example. That might be what you want to argue, and you might set out the reasons why you're going to argue that. So that's your golden thread, your central line of argument. Everything that you say must come back to your central line of argument. Does it support your central line of argument? Does it illustrate your central line of argument? Is it an elaboration upon your central line of argument? Because if it's not, if you're just talking about stuff, what's it doing in there? You're not going to get marks for it. Okay? So make sure that what you say is coherent, that everything hangs off of this golden thread. Now that's why I've asked you to start thinking about your abstract, to start thinking about what you might want your argument to say. So think of it this way. 5 years' time, I'm shopping in Morrison's or wherever it is I shop, and I bump into you and I say, you're the one that wrote the essay on Radical Criminology where you argue this. So in a nutshell, what is your paper actually arguing? Okay, that's what you need to be thinking about. What do you want the reader to take away from your paper? Okay, so then it's a matter of actually setting out what evidence you have for your argument. Okay. Right, is this making some sense to you? Yeah? So, this is one way that you can approach. So there's different ways of doing this, but this is just to give you some indication of how you might want to approach this in terms of moving into the higher categories. Because, when we mark stuff, you've got to remember, we want to give you high grades. We want to give you a grade that's obviously matches your aptitude and your effort. But you need to give us the evidence. You need to give us the tools in which to be able to justify the grade we're giving you. So this is something I'm talking about. Right, here's your paper. Okay. Your introduction, that's your introduction. Okay. Your conclusion should be about the same kind of length. Okay. They should be pretty similar. It will be argued, it has been argued. Okay. Throughout, okay, so you've got these are like references. Okay. References throughout. Every single one of these references should be in your bibliography, okay? Just to make sure that nothing is left out here. Everything, that's the whole purpose of you providing the bibliography. So what do you do next? Okay, right, so here's your different sections. Right, now ask yourself, you've got your golden thread. Okay, now some of you, there's some murmuring, I mentioned the word count earlier on, 3,500. Well, I don't know if you were murmuring because you thought there was a lot of, because I said you couldn't go 10% over, I don't know what it was. But this is the important point. When you go through, there's a question, okay, ask yourself, does that paragraph, or does these paragraphs together, do they together answer this question? Okay? If they don't, what you're saying is not actually helping. You need to address the question. You need to apply the theory specifically to a particular topic. And if you're not doing that, or together if these aren't doing it, then you need to seriously think about your focus. Okay? You need to make what you're saying more focused at the task at hand. These are things that are really, really important. As I say, 75% of you are just going to talk about theory, talk about a topic, and expect us to work out how you're using it. Yeah? That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to make it very clear how you're applying the theory or perspective to a particular topic. Yeah? Right. Does anybody have any questions on what I've looked at so far? Is this making some sense? Yeah? Right, so let's look at this. So let's look at this now. Applying theory. Right, I'm going to ask you some questions now. How are you going to go about applying theory? What's your approach going to be here? What sort of things have you been thinking about how you might do this? It's a question for you guys. How are you going to apply your theory? What approach are you going to take here? Any thoughts?
How that a theory can be influential in describing
How
can it help us better understand the situation?
So how persuasive is it as an explanatory framework?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that might be one thing you can look at. By the way, I'm just going to come back to this in a second, but something's just come to me that I need to emphasise to you, because this is what I anticipate is going to happen with many of you. Okay, so just be mindful of this. Try not to do this. Okay, you spend the first half of the essay saying this is feminism, okay, and then you spend the next part of the essay saying this is human trafficking, and then this bit here is where you actually apply that to that. Okay, what's wrong with that?
Then it's just explaining a theory and a subject.
You're not doing what's been done, are you? You're not doing what's been requested of you, which is to apply the theory. You are, but you're doing it in that section there, so you're only going to get graded for that bit there. This is what I was saying about when I was talking about, this is what I meant when I was talking about people, students, inviting the reader to infer relevance. So you're talking about feminism, talking about human trafficking, and then you're assuming that we know why you're talking about it. Okay? You need to make the direct links. Okay? So you need to structure what you're saying. So one thing you can do is focus upon how persuasive the theory or perspective is as an explanatory framework. Okay? That might be one way of approaching this. I'm just going to jot down some things here and I'll try and make sense of it for you. What other approaches might you take there? How else do you apply a theory? How else might you go about this? Any other thoughts? No other thoughts?
Evaluating like studies that have already been done.
Right, okay, so what evidence is there, okay, for how a theory can be, or what evidence is there to explain a particular theory? Yeah? You could also look at things like policies, or what policy comes from the theory? Okay? How can you apply that policy? You could look at things like the assumption. You need to reveal that all theories perspectives make assumptions as well. You know, how do they reveal themselves when you apply the theory to a particular phenomenon? Okay? What else? What other things might you do when you apply a theory? One thing to bear in mind is that when you're dealing in social theory, there isn't like an A equals B causal relationship. Okay, what you'll tend to find is that there's a kind of a correlation. There's you know, at best theories will explain the phenomena not 100% absolutely, but they'll be more or less persuasive. Okay, so what is the evidence to support this theory in explaining a particular phenomenon? Okay, so the first and foremost, what you need to do before you even think about any of this is you need to understand the theory, okay, or the perspective. What is it seeking to do? So what you could do is, at the beginning here, you could say, right, first of all, you need to have your argument. We'll come back to that in a moment. But what you could do before that, after that, is that you set out the key tenets. These are the key tenets of this perspective. You do that very briefly. Okay, don't spend too long because you're just being descriptive there. And then you apply those specifically to the phenomenon that you're looking at. Okay, so how do these apply to whatever it is you're looking at? Okay, and what conclusions can we draw from that? What evidence is there? So when you take all of that, you can then link that back into your introduction. Right, this is what this paper is going to argue. Okay, that you know, a particular framework is useful. Now, at the beginning, I said to you, you need to choose one of the perspectives, okay, one of the theories. Now, one thing that you could do, okay, and again, you might want to clarify this with your seminar tutor as well if you're not sure about how to approach it. Let's take feminism, for example, again. We know, well, you don't know at this stage because we've not had the lecture, but when we have the lecture, you'll know that there are different strands. So there are feminist criminology. So you've got a whole range of different strands. You've got liberal feminism, radical feminism, you've got Marxist feminism, socialist feminism, psychoanalytic feminism, existential feminism, a whole different range of types of feminism that you've got. Now, what you could do is you could take, say, liberal feminism and radical feminism, and you could show how you can apply them to a particular phenomena, like trafficking, for example, and you could show how they would be different in their application. Because radical feminists and liberal feminists would approach the same topic in very different ways, particularly in terms of the policy which they promote, which they advocate. Okay? So that might be one approach that you could do, or one approach that you could take here. Okay, so try to think about creative ways of doing this. Now, obviously, you know, I don't want to be too prescriptive here. Experience has told me if I stand here now and give you an example of how you could do this in real concrete terms, I'm going to get 90% of you writing essays on that topic, and I don't want to do that. Okay, but I want to encourage you to think outside of the box, think creatively, and you've got the support of your seminar tutors as well, and me. Come and speak to me, come and speak to your seminar tutor. If you're not sure about how to approach this, okay, we're here to help you. So, you know, in the coming weeks, we will have time dedicated in the seminars for you to actually discuss some of the things that might be worrying you about the assessment. But come and see us. You've also got our office hours as well. Come and see us during that time as well, okay? So don't sit at home thinking, well, I don't know what to do, don't know what to do. Don't leave it to the last minute as well, because obviously, if you leave it to the last minute and send us an email 2 days before saying, I don't know what I'm doing, we're likely to say, well, why didn't you tell us this 3 weeks ago when we could have helped you? Okay, so we want to help, but you know, you need to manage your time effectively as well, okay? So, just to reiterate then, the coursework cover sheet I've put up there is just kind of indicating some good practice. That's all it is. You don't have to do it that way. You don't have to set out a rationale. You don't have to set out an argument. But I would suggest to you that, you know, this is good practice. You know, if you do these things, your paper will probably be better as a consequence. But there are different ways of doing it. I don't want you to stifle your own way of doing this. But you know, these are just kind of things that you could think about. Yeah. Now, in terms of the abstracts, okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to stop recording this, and what we're going to do is I'm going to open the room up now to any questions and queries you might have specifically on your abstracts, okay, on your arguments. Now, we're going to do this in a way that I want you to stay where you are and ask me in front of everyone else, because what I suspect is going to happen is we're going to end up repeating ourselves again and again and again. So it's going to be important that you listen to what we say to other people, okay? And then there will be an opportunity for you to speak to Shamila and myself individually in a few moments after that, okay? So are there any questions?